good, all you beautiful people out there? How y'all doing today? That is fantastic. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Diesel Sports Podcast, the podcast where we talk everything National Football League, in season, off season, it doesn't matter because it's football. I'm your host, Double Diesel, and welcome to this divisional round recap show of the divisional round of the 2023 National Football League playoffs. Before we dive deeper into the episode, I would like to ask, if you have not already, please go like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy this content or know anybody who would enjoy this content. Helps boost my exposure, get us out to more eyeballs, more viewers. So if you haven't done that and you'd like to, that'd be greatly appreciated. Also, if you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And if you'd like to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. You'll get exclusive content such as my draft content that is going to be starting up fairly soon that I'm super excited for, such as access to my draft board, team-specific mock drafts, etc. But let's get on with the show. Man, oh man, divisional round is behind us. Championship Sunday is right around the corner. And not as great of a football week as I was hoping for, though we did get some great storylines coming out of this week. But as far as great games, close games, we didn't get a whole lot of that, unfortunately, which is kind of disappointing. But that doesn't mean that we didn't get a lot of interesting things to talk about. And, of course, the weekend started off on Saturday between a game that I was looking forward to and ended up being really the best game of the weekend. That was the Jacksonville Jaguars heading to Kansas City to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. And, so I want to start off talking about the Jaguars first. I want to just get the Jaguars out of the way. First of all, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they showed that they were a team that's fun. It's a fun team, but it's not ready to compete with the big boys yet because they had multiple opportunities, both offensively and defensively, in this game to take the lead and ultimately win this ball game that they just did not take advantage of whatsoever. That defense couldn't. It's kind of sad, especially late in that game, that they couldn't stop basically half of Patrick Mahomes, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. That was kind of disappointing. I was ranting and raving about how this Jags team was going to be, kind of like the Bengals of last year, where they sort of came out of nowhere. No one expected them to. So I kind of ate a pile of shit for that. But with that being said, it was still a great year for the Jaguars, and it's nothing but positivity, and you'll have nothing to look forward to but positive things going forward into 2023. Doug Peterson, I shat on him when they hired him. He was a really good hiring for this team. He was exactly what this team needed. Now, granted, anything that was an upgrade, anything from Urban Meyer is going to be considered an upgrade. But there were a lot of aspects of this team that really overperformed and shut up a lot of people. Christian Kirk, really that whole free agency signing class, they broke the bank on that free agency class, but they weren't criticizing the Jaguars for spending all that money. They were criticizing them because of who they chose to spend that money on. And a lot of those guys that they brought in through the offseason, they were really big key factors on this team that helped them get to this point. And also, Trevor Lawrence is awesome. You have your guy, Jacksonville. You have your guy. That part of the problem is solved. So you know that you have your guy for the future. Now it's just trying to build a consistent winner, try and build something that actually can compete with those big boys maybe next year and beyond. But all in all, disappointing end to what was a really fun season, but it was a great season nonetheless. So, Jags fans, I'd be pleased and happy if I were you. Now, though, we need to talk about the thing that everyone is talking about during the game and post-game, and that is all the way up to Championship Sunday. It is going to be Patrick Mahomes ankle watch 24/7. Now, I did not, unfortunately, get to watch this game live because of I was at work when this game was going on. But I was hearing about the injury. I did see the injury, the high ankle sprain. It was a nasty looking one that was so bad that they actually took him out of the game for a bit. We got Chad Henne. I missed Chad Henne action for a little bit there, but he did eventually come back in the game, and you saw it, though. He was not himself. And here's the thing, though. He was playing this game. They were still moving the ball. He was still making throws, but he was visibly in pain. He was hobbling around. He was limping around mid plays. Like, he was clearly uncomfortable, clearly hurt. And high ankle sprains, I don't know if you've ever had a high ankle sprain before. It is no joke. They are extremely painful. A lot of cases, they're more painful than an actual break. So, and here's the thing, like, everyone's saying, like, he said after the game that he was absolutely going to, Patrick Mahomes, that is, he said after the game that he was going to play, he was going to be playing in the championship game. But, like, and a lot of athletes that have had high ankle sprains will tell you, like, it's fine the day you hurt. Like, it's fine to walk on it the day you hurt it. It still feels uncomfortable, but you can walk on it on the day you hurt it. The second you wake up the next morning, though, it gets stiff, it gets uncomfortable, you can barely put any weight on it at all, and then within the next 2 days, you're on crutches. So it is a matter of, can he actually perform? If he wants to, like, the competitor in him wants to. Of course he wants to play, but it's a matter of, will the team sacrifice his health for the sake of trying to get back to the Super Bowl? Now, potentially not. It all depends on how much in pain he actually is. Now, they could just shoot his ankle up with every single drug known to man so he can walk on it and play on it. I don't know if the league still does that or if they would even allow that to still happen. But, yeah, it's going to be a fascinating thing. It's going to be a really fascinating thing, especially when you take into consideration their opponents, and we're going to talk about their opponents later on. They're going to need every single bit of Patrick Mahomes that they could possibly get, and in him getting a high ankle sprain, an injury like this at this point in the season against this particular opponent next week, it could not have come at a worse time. You can make the argument, because they're not, I hate to break it to you, Chiefs fans, you're not going to win that game with Chad Henne and a quarterback. I'm sorry. I like Chad Henne, but he's not going to be the guy to win it for you. So it's going to be a very fascinating thing to watch. It's a very fascinating thing to monitor. Ultimately, I do think he's going to play. I think he's going to find a way, somehow, whether it's shooting it up with some kind of drug, taping it to hell. He's going to find a way to play some way, somehow. So it's going to be a tough battle, though, and especially when you consider their opponent that we're going to talk about in a bit. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the next game after this, which was the New York Giants against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. NFC East playoff matchup. That's always a lot of fun to see. Now, I've been saying, both here and to some of my buddies who follow football as well, that if there was one matchup from the divisional round that I can absolutely, positively see an upset happening in, it was the New York Giants upsetting the Philadelphia Eagles. And that is because I looked at this Giants team who played so well against Minnesota, and Daniel Jones looked so good in that playoff game, and Saquon looks back to what he was when he first started. And, I just saw this team, and I got sucked into how great of a coach Brian Daboll was. And I was like, I feel like going against an Eagles team that has had a week break, but Jalen Hurts is still not 100%. They kind of teetered off a little bit those last couple games of the season. I felt like the Giants started getting more momentum, and I thought they were going to carry that momentum and eventually beat the Eagles in the divisional round. And that I felt like that was the most likely matchup to have an upset in. Could I have been more wrong on that? I don't think I could have been more wrong. This was a slaughter. This was a fucking slaughter in every which way you could possibly have imagined. Uh, there's no other way to say it. The Eagles boat raced the New York Giants. They boat raced. There we go. Yeah, they boat raced the New York Giants. It wasn't even a competition. The clock struck midnight on Daniel Jones. He went back to Danny Derp. He went from Danny Dimes one week to Danny Derp the next. Saquon couldn't do anything. That offense couldn't do anything. Brian Daboll, as great of a coach as he was completely overmatched by an Eagles team that was just had a better roster, that was better coached, which is kind of the more shocking thing. I shouldn't say more shocking because Nick Sirianni has done a phenomenal job with this Eagles team in the past couple of years. And it's just, I ate a pile of shit. The Eagles made me eat a pile of shit, and you know what? I am going to be okay with that because, holy shit, this Eagles team has been just fantastic. They've been arguably the best team in the NFL for most of the year, and they show in the divisional round that even though they kind of skidded off the last couple weeks of the regular season, that they still are a force to be reckoned with. And Jalen Hurts, even if he's not at 100%, is close to asserting himself as one of the elites of the league. And I do think Jalen Hurts this year has put himself in the category of being an elite quarterback. And I dare say MVP favorite, but that's just me. But yeah, this Eagles team is just, everyone was saying most of the year that they were the favorite coming out of the NFC. And you just look at this team and you look at how they play and you're just asking, how could they not be? You know, Jalen Hurts, I just was raving about him and how he's played this year. A.J. Brown has done wonders for this day. Like, I don't even think even diehard Eagles fans was expecting just how much of an impact A.J. Brown coming here was going to have. And that's saying a lot because A.J. Brown, when he came here, was a legitimate top 10 to top 5 wide receiver. And he came in here and not only gave this team a legit number one and truly elevated everyone else on this offense, he helped elevate this team to heights that I didn't even think was possible for this Eagles team coming into the year. Because remember, this was an Eagles team last year that they made it to the playoffs as a 7th seed, but all of their wins didn't come against a team that had a winning record, and they got blown out in the wild card round by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And they're like, and they didn't make that many improvements in the offseason. Yes, they added James Bradbury and stuff like that. And yes, they added Hassan Reddick, who's been phenomenal. Both these guys have been phenomenal this year. But outside of that, and they got A.J. Brown, but you're like, all right, this team can maybe be in contention for the NFC East next year, potentially. But even then, I thought, like, all right, this might be, like, they might improve to 10, maybe 11 win team, maybe if they're lucky, and maybe win their division, and we'll see what happens from there. Nobody was expecting this team to A, be the number one seed, and B, look this dominant regardless of opponent. And it's just something special. And Howie Roseman, I've been saying this all year, Howie Roseman has a very love-hate relationship, or I should say the city of Philadelphia has a very love-hate relationship with Howie Roseman, because one year everyone in Philadelphia wants him fired. They all want his head on a stick. And then the next year they're all saying he's the best general manager in football. And this year is one of the years where he has shown he's the best general manager in football. I've been saying this since the start of the year. This Eagles team is a masterclass of putting a roster together. It is as close to a masterclass of a roster that you could possibly get in today's NFL, and the way it's structured with free agency, with cap space, with all these different things, rookie contracts for veterans getting richer and richer by the year. This was a masterclass of a roster that Howie Roseman has put together. And this team is you're getting a lot of 2017 vibes from this Eagles team. And they're a lot of fun to watch. And I can't wait for Sunday. I cannot wait for Sunday. That's all I'm going to say. But now we get to the final two games, which were the games on Sunday. And you know what? I'm not going to do this in chronological order. I'm actually going to talk about the last game first, and then the second to last game last. So the first game I want to talk about is Cowboys-Niners, which is going to be coming into this game. It was, all right, who's going to Philadelphia? And was it going to be a divisional matchup or NFC East matchup between Eagles Cowboys, or was it going to be the matchup of the two best teams in the NFC? Legitimately, not just record-wise, legitimately the two best teams in the NFC and the Eagles and Niners. And I want to talk about the 49ers first. 49ers won this game 19-12. And this, I was talking about how the Niners they might be the best team in the NFL. I've been saying that for a couple weeks now. And, I've been ranting or raving about Brock Purdy and how he's not just the captain just trying to keep the ship afloat. He's been legitimately, what's the word? Oh, fuck. Shit, what is it? He's been actively involved in making big plays for this team to help this team win. He's not just steering the ship and trying not to crash it. And, I was talking about how great of an addition Christian McCaffrey was and how lethal this offense is and obviously how great this defense is. And on Sunday, the defense showed that they are still one of the league's elite, if not the elite of the league. But the offense, here's the thing, because the Cowboys defense is no joke. The Dallas Cowboys defense is no joke whatsoever. So I want to, like, Micah Parsons he's been a Defensive Player of the Year candidate all year. Dan Quinn has done a phenomenal job with this defense. And so I want to preference this by saying that first. Because this week was not the best week for the 49er offense. In particular, Brock Purdy. And this was not his best game. Since he's taken over as the starter, this has been far from his best game. This has probably been his worst game since he's taken over as the starter for this team. And it really makes you wonder, because I did preference with this is the Cowboys defense they're playing against. So how much of this was the Cowboys defense really knowing how to game plan against this offense and try to hold this offense at bay? And how much of this was the game is finally starting to catch up to Brock Purdy? How much of it is that? So it is something that is noteworthy, especially now the Eagles defense is not as good, in my opinion, as the Cowboys defense, but them as a team, the Eagles are a much tougher opponent than the Dallas Cowboys. So it is going to be very fascinating, but this past week, it does give you some concern of, all right, can this offense still hold up, considering the last three teams that are still in this, still alive in this postseason tournament is not, they're far from the easiest opponents. Like these, you're not getting any like fluke Cinderella teams that are still alive. Like, no, like the four teams that are still around are legitimately the four best teams in the NFL. And you do get a little concerned with how Purdy and the offense played against Dallas of, can they hold up against the Eagles, against the Chiefs, against the Cincinnati Bengals? And it really does. It sucks because it's such a great story still, and the story's still alive. Like, if there's a Cinderella story still alive, it's Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy is Cinderella in this case. And it really does. I'm trying to get the right words here to describe this without me repeating myself. But this was the first time this week where it did feel like he was just trying not to crash the ship. And this is the first time where he didn't look like a legitimate starter, that he looked like an actual backup. And he did have to rely And that's the reason he does have to rely on these incredibly talented playmakers in this offense. And you can make the argument that that's the only reason that he's looked good. And I personally disagree that that's not the only reason he's looked good. I think he's looked good because he's played really well, and that's not just because of the talent around him. But yeah, this week he was getting swarmed. He was kind of getting bullied a little bit. I think this was I feel like this was his first welcome to the NFL game, and you don't really want that to happen in the postseason, but it happened, and I think he's going to learn from it. And defensively, it's going to be the hardest defense I think he plays the rest of the tournament, but the overall competition gets harder, and now you get into the talk of, can Brock Purdy, if he has to get into a shootout with Jalen Hurts, with Joe Burrow, with Patrick Mahomes, can he hold up in a shootout against those teams? Because now you have trust in that Niner defense to hold the offenses they play against at bay for the most part. But at the end of the day, Patrick Mahomes is still Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow is still Joe Burrow. So we shall wait and see on that. But the NFC Championship game is going to be really fun. Eagles-Niners. So will the AFC title game this year. Now, as far as the Dallas Cowboys are concerned, I'm a football fan. I'm a natural football fan. So naturally, I like laughing at the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys postseason failure always gives me a little extra laugh, a nice belly laugh when I'm feeling down. So sorry, Cowboys fans. That's just how I feel. But I think we need to have a serious conversation about the Dallas Cowboys. One, their defense I don't think is that much of a problem. Their defense played well. Like I said, Dan Quinn has done a phenomenal job with that team, though I think he's probably going to be leaving to get a head coaching job in the offseason. I think he's definitely earned it. But the main problem with this team comes down to the offense, more specifically the quarterback position. And I want to preference this by saying Tony Pollard being injured did not help. Tony Pollard getting hurt in this game, getting an ankle injury in this game, leaving in an air cast on his leg did not help whatsoever. So that definitely hindered the offense. But Dak Prescott is... Here's the thing. Dak Prescott, in my eyes, is the NFL's Jekyll and Hyde. In the sense that you never know what you're going to get with him week to week. Some weeks, he looks like a legit, elite franchise quarterback that was worth every single penny that Jerry Jones paid him. And then the next week, he'll turn into Mr. Hyde and start throwing interceptions, turn the ball over, hindering this team more than helping it, and looking terrible in losses. He is the definition of a Jekyll and Hyde, where the highs are really, really high, but the lows are really, really low. And the problem is you never know which one you're going to get. And it's not even like an every other week sort of thing. It's just like there'll be like a 3-week span where he plays phenomenal, but then there'll be like a 5-week span where he doesn't play great. So, and this was another situation like this postseason with Dak perfectly, in my eyes, perfectly shows that he really is Jekyll and Hyde, because you had last week against Tampa where he played as perfect of a game as you could possibly play from the quarterback position. And it was easily the best game of his career in my eyes. And he was just lighting it up. He had 4 touchdown passes, 5 total, including 1 rushing touchdown. He and the Cowboys offense just could not be stopped. He was firing all cylinders. He was feeling it. And he was on a roll. And then immediately the next week against the Niners, and I know the 49ers defense is elite. I know the 49ers defense is an elite shit-wrecking unit. But this was not good. This was not good. And I think I said this during the live show. Like, Dak Prescott should have legitimately, like, I think he only had like 2 interceptions, I think. He should have legitimately had like 5 or 6. Like, there were a lot of really bad turnover-worthy throws that he had in this game that should have, like, I'm dead serious when I say, like, a lot of those throws he should have ended the day with 5 picks. And he's lucky he didn't. So, he in my eyes is not a franchise quarterback. I think, Cowboys fans and I think some people in the media want to say that Dak can be a top 10 quarterback and he's good enough to be that. And I do think he's good, like talent-wise, I think he's good enough to be a top 10 guy. But I don't think he hasn't shown it enough consistently for me to ever think that he can be that guy. And what makes it more frustrating is that he's getting paid like a franchise quarterback, but there are a lot of guys in this league that are paid like franchise quarterbacks that are nowhere near that caliber. The biggest one is Kirk Cousins. And honestly, I think Dak Prescott is more like Kirk Cousins than I think Cowboys fans and anyone in the media would really like to admit. So, it's kind of like with Kirk Cousins. It's like what you see is what you get. It's kind of the same thing with Dak. Like, what you see is what you get. And there's really nothing else to say. And I also, another thing with Dak that I want to talk about, that I'm getting sick and tired of. I'm sick and tired of saying, oh, we need to see more of Dak. We need to wait for Dak to get through because he will be there someday. He will be there someday. He's going to get to that point. I was just saying, like, the media and Cowboys fans are saying he can be a top 10. I think he can get to being a top 10 quarterback someday. Here's the problem with the someday argument. This is year 7 for Dak. This is year 7 for Dak Prescott. There is no more someday he can be this. There is no more of that. When you're this deep into your career, that is it. That is it. And there's very, very few guys in history that have been in the league for a long ass time and that have finally got over the hump and won a championship, John Elway being the biggest one. But the difference is John Elway is a Hall of Fame quarterback, and everyone knew, even during those years where he was constantly getting eliminated in the Super Bowl or in the playoffs, everyone still knew that this was an extremely talented quarterback who was going to be a future Hall of Famer. You don't think that with Dak Prescott. Dak Prescott is not in the same stratosphere as John Elway ever was at any point. So I'm sick and tired of everyone saying, like, oh, he can be that someday. We're 7 years in. He's going to go into year 8. This is his, like, this, he is maxed out. This is what he is. This is what he's going to be for the rest of his career, how much longer he plays. Maybe if he gets a couple more elite players around him, maybe then. But with Dak, I keep saying it, but it rings true with him. What you see is what you get, and there's nothing more out of it. Everyone's saying, like, he has the potential to be one. When you're 7 years in, potential is thrown out the window. There's no more potential anymore. This is it. This is what you got. You can stick with him if you want to, but you have to understand this is what you got, and it's not going to get any better than this. He can be a top 10 quarterback one day. Look, if it fucking looks like a duck, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, chances are it's not a fucking chicken. So spare me, Cowboys fans. Spare me, Skip Bayless. Spare me, media, with the whole fucking he can be. He can be. No, he is this. He is this. That is it. That is all, and there's nothing more to it. So now with that out of the way, we have one more game to talk about. And it was the second and last game of the weekend, but it's the game that I think I want to talk about more. And it's also the game that a lot of people were really fascinated by. And that is, of course, the Cincinnati Bengals taking on the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo in a snowstorm. God, I'm telling you, those who played football, whether in high school, college, whatever level, there is nothing like playing a football game in the snow. Now, traction kind of sucks. It sucks to keep your balance a lot, but playing in the snow is a lot of fun. And it's so great to see. And you don't really see them anymore because a lot of teams are going to domes. I think Buffalo is actually set to go to a dome in the near future. But here we are. This is a snow game in the postseason on a Sunday between two of the best teams in the NFL. You wouldn't have it any other way. Or at least it was supposed to be a matchup of the two best teams in the NFL because you wouldn't have thought that these were two of the elite teams in the league watching this game. The Cincinnati Bengals beat the Bills 27-10. This was a blowout. This was a blowout in damn near every sense of the word. And you could have got that feeling from the very first drive of the game where the Cincinnati Bengals took the ball first and they just drove down the field with complete ease. And Jamar Chase scored the first touchdown of the game on a wide open touchdown. When I say wide open, there was not a Buffalo Bill within 15 yards of him. And he was just wide open in the soft zone, and he just scampered into the end zone. Touchdown, 7-0. Following drive, Bengals defense forces a 3-and-out on the Bills' first possession. Bengals get the ball right back, do the same exact thing. Drive right down the field and score a touchdown to Hayden Hurst on another wide open touchdown. All of a sudden it's 14-0, and all of a sudden you just sort of felt, all right, this is the Bengals' day to win. Because already 3 drives into the game, it already felt like the Buffalo Bills were defeated because you just didn't sense. On a game where Damar Hamlin was back in the building, in the press box, watching, cheering on his team, and a rematch of the game where Damar Hamlin suffered that terrifying incident where he almost died on the football field. And in Cincinnati on Monday Night Football, and both teams were affected. Like, we were all talking about how the Buffalo Bills were horribly affected. The Cincinnati Bengals were also affected because they also were witnessing Damar Hamlin being brought back to life on the field. They witnessed this as well. So you can imagine how they also were emotional seeing this live in front of them. So this was an emotional matchup coming in. And yet, despite all that, with everything we were talking about with the Buffalo Bills, how they were one of the best teams in the NFL, how they had all the emotional, how they've overcome so much with traveling and emotionally and within the team and outside factors and all this stuff. And yet, the Buffalo Bills, like I said, with Damar Hamlin in the stadium, came out and just looked flat. And Matt Milano said this after the game. He said after the game, they came out and they didn't have a lot of energy. Why? Why did they not have a lot of energy? With everything this team has gone through, all of a sudden, now all of a sudden they ran out of gas. Now all of a sudden they don't have any energy. In a game of this magnitude, at this stage of the playoffs, against this team, it just doesn't make sense why they all of a sudden just came out with no energy. And it showed. And the defense that was usually stout, all of a sudden couldn't stop anything. It felt like, I think it was, what was it, Jason McCourty, I think? I could be mistaken. It was some former player that said during this game that it looked like the Bills' defense was like going through like a walkthrough, like a Saturday walkthrough. That's what it looked like the Bills were doing in the game, because they put up no resistance. They put up no resistance. They couldn't rush Joe Burrow. They couldn't stop the run. And this is a Bengals team that was terrible at running the football all year. They rushed for over 150 yards on him on Sunday. And it doesn't make sense. And the Bengals looked like the team that benefited from the snow and playing in the snow and dominating and can't be stopped. And yet it was the Bills, the team in Buffalo, New York, that a place where it feels like it snows 9 months out of the year. They should be used to this. They should be used to the snow and the cold. And yet they came out and they looked like they didn't want to play. They looked like they didn't want to play in these conditions. And it feels horrible to say it, but I've kind of even felt this the past couple years where it almost feels like the Buffalo Bills are kind of soft in a lot of ways. And it's not something you would expect with a team located in Buffalo, New York, but they just feel soft with, their refusal to believe in the running game, not playing well in weather conditions where they should be playing well in, i.e. the snow. It's just there's something going on, and I don't know what it is. Josh Allen, I don't want to say he's falling off a cliff. That's too much of an exaggeration, but he has definitely taken a step back, and I don't think he's anymore in that upper echelon of elite quarterbacks because his turnovers skyrocketed this year. He was having more turnover-worthy plays than he was the past couple of years. The Buffalo Bills, they still do not believe in a running game. Yeah, they drafted James Cook. Yes, Devin Singletary's solid, but they still, for some reason, it's not even that they don't want... Like, here's the thing. There's a difference between a team not being able to run the football and a team not wanting to run the football. The Buffalo Bills are a team that does not want to run the football. Their running game is Josh Allen, and they didn't even do that. They didn't even have any designed quarterback runs, and when they did, that was late in the game where it felt like it was over. So this is a team that for some reason does not have a philosophy of running the football. They have a great defense, but even then, the defense just constantly runs all these soft zones. And so, yeah, even though they have this great defense with great players, they still don't, scare you. So it's a weird mentality they have that you wouldn't expect out of a team located in a blue-collar city where it snows all the fucking time, and yet they still come out with a mentality that feels so, I gotta say it, soft, with an inability to run the football, or a refusal to run the football, I should say. It just, you can't win in today's NFL and not be able to run the football to some degree, because a lot of teams in recent years are starting, we've seen a resurgence in the running back position. We've seen a resurgence in the running game. Yes, the passing game is still effective and it's still around predominantly and it's still sexy, but the run game has really made a resurgence over these past couple of years, and the Bills are falling behind. And when you look at the 4 teams that are left in the postseason right now, Kansas City Chiefs, not known for running the football, but with Patrick Mahomes, they don't have to. But even then, when they do run the football, it's still relatively effective with Isaiah Pacheco and Jerick McKinnon, etc. And Cincinnati Bengals, they weren't great at running the football this year, but they still have Joe Mixon and Samaje Perine, and they show that if they can commit to running the football, they are incredibly effective at it. The San Francisco 49ers, they have one of the best running backs in the NFL in Christian McCaffrey, and they are a great running team. And then you have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are the best running team in the NFL. They became the number 1 seed because of how dominant they were running the football. So it showed like, yes, you got to have, yes, it helps to have a great athletic quarterback with a rocket arm. Yes, it helps to have a great passing game with great receivers. But you also need to you also need a good running game to A, keep things balanced, and B, to keep to keep a defense on their toes, so that if the passing game doesn't work, you have the running game to lean back on. If the running game doesn't work, you have the passing game to lean back on. So it's not you're always stuck. It's not so you're always one dimensional, and the Buffalo Bills are just straight up one dimensional. Where I don't know if it's the organization thinking that, all right, we have Josh Allen and he is so athletic and he can run the football very well, that we don't have to. I don't know if it's because we have Josh Allen, so we don't have to get the greatest support around him, whether it's the offensive line or great running backs or whatever. But it's a broken philosophy that needs to be fixed. And with the Bills, it really did feel like these last 2 years were, if they were going to win a championship, it felt like these last 2 years were the years to do it. Definitely last year, definitely this year. And because, when they lost to the Chiefs in the divisional round last year and that overtime thriller, it felt like, all right, we lost, but next year's our year for sure. Next year, we're going to be one of the elites. Next year's our year. They came into this year as betting favorites to win the Super Bowl. This year, they get blown out at home. They don't even make it to the conference title game. And all of a sudden, that hope that you felt last year of like, hey, next year's our year, all of a sudden you don't feel that anymore. And I really do feel like, especially considering when you look at their free agents, they have Jordan Poyer hitting free agency, Jermaine Edmonds hitting free agency, Robert Saffold hitting free agency, like all these really key players that are set to hit free agency. And it just feels, I don't want to say like time's ticking up with this Bills team, but it does feel like their championship window is slowly closing. And I'll say this, if they don't win a championship next year, or at the very least make it to the Super Bowl next year, I think after that, then their championship window will be officially closed. Because not necessarily because they won't have the talent to do it, but because I think that affects a team's psyche. A team that constantly gets to a certain point and then loses it in humiliating fashion, or loses that same spot over and over again, that's going to have an effect on a team's psyche. Look at this very Bills franchise back in the 90s. They talk about in that fourth Super Bowl, the second one against the Cowboys, where they made it to 4 straight Super Bowls and lost all 4. And that fourth one, they always say, like, in the second half, the Bills were up big against the Cowboys. They were dominating. They were firing on all cylinders in that first half. But when you hit halftime, you looked at the Bills players, and they didn't look like they were firing on all cylinders. They looked like a team that was not scared of messing up, but they looked like a team of, when are we going to mess up? It's going to happen at some point. And when you have a team that makes it to that spot that many times in a row, and you just historically have not had great things happen to you, eventually that's going to get a psyche in the team where it's just like, all right, it's going to happen at some point. When's it going to happen? It's going to happen at some point. Hell, look at the Atlanta Falcons. Anytime they get a significant lead and then their opponent scores once or twice, they immediately are like, oh no, it's happening again. And then they just, at that point, continue to play the game, try not to mess up, and try not to blow the lead, and then they blow the lead as a result. It all harps back to that Super Bowl 51 against New England, where they were up 28-3 and lost. And that has had a psychological effect on that franchise ever since. Every time they get a big lead or a significant lead, they immediately, after their opponent scores once or twice, just curl up into a ball and try not to lose the game. And it's affected that team ever since. And I think that this Bills team is at risk of doing that if they don't even make it to the Super Bowl next year. That's what I think. Now we need to talk about, let's get away from all the the depressing things for a second. Because now I want to talk about the team that won this game. That being the Cincinnati Bengals. We've been talking about, who the elites of the league are. And it's tough to say because there are legitimately, I think the 4 teams that are around now are all 4 teams that you can make cases for of who's going to win the Super Bowl and who is the best team in the NFL. And the Bengals have asserted themselves in that mix. And God, they're just so freaking good. Like, they are. Joe Burrow has legitimately become my favorite player in the NFL because he has. I've acknowledged on this channel that I'm a Patriots fan. I grew up watching half of the Patriot dynasty right in front of my very eyes. So I have all the confidence in the world in saying Joe Burrow is Tom Brady 2.0. He is just a cold-blooded killer at quarterback. Nothing phases him. Nothing ever rattles him. He's just going to sit back, do his job, look cool as shit doing it, and he is going to take out your team whether come hell or high water, and he is going to look so badass doing it. And it is just something so phenomenal to watch. Watching him in his last year at LSU, how he dominated everyone at LSU, and then coming into the NFL and had a decent rookie year until he got hurt, but then he came back in his sophomore year, and ever since then has just completely turned this Bengals franchise around and turned them into constant perennial winners. And here they are, after they went into Buffalo in the snow, a setting that should be tailor-made for the Bills to win, and they demolished them. And here they are going to their second straight AFC Championship game, the first time they've made it to back-to-back conference games in franchise history. And it's just something surreal to watch, to see a guy like Burrow take an organization that, remember, when they drafted him, they were the worst team in football when they drafted him. And that was back in 2019. That was fucking 3 years ago. It was 3 years ago that they were the worst team in the NFL and wasn't even close. So to see where they are now in such a short amount of time, not just with Burrow, with T. Higgins, with Jamar Chase, with Tyler Boyd, like, it's so rare in the NFL to find a legit alpha number 1 wide receiver. Like, I don't think people realize just how difficult it is to find somebody like that. To find a real guy that you could put out one-on-one and you can trust them to win any matchup that they go up against. It is incredibly hard to find guys like that. Cincinnati Bengals have 3 of them. They have 3 of those guys. Chase, Higgins, and Boyd are all legit number 1 wide receivers on every other NFL team. You have Jamar Chase, who is this insane run-after-catch threat. You could just throw it to him on a bubble screen, and he has the threat to just take it to the house. He has one of those rare abilities of he can catch it on any route, anywhere on the field, and be a threat to score. And then you have T. Higgins, who might actually be this team's number 1 wide receiver. He definitely plays like it. He definitely produces like it. And it is where he can run any route you ask him to. And you could just throw it up to him, and you know he's going to catch it most of the time. And he is just a definition of a ball winner. And then you have Tyler Boyd, who is a monster in the slot, can run any route you run on the ask. You ask him to run. There we go. Sure. But he is Mr. Reliable in the slot, and he's just as good of a run after catch threat as those guys, just as good of a playmaker as those other 2 guys. And that's Burrow's surrounding cast. And then you have Joe Burrow, who's the perfect leader of them all. And it's just something special to watch. To see where this Bengals team was just 3 years ago and to see where they are now is just, it's phenomenal to see. And yeah, man, it's just, and also shout out to that defense. Still one of the most underrated units in the NFL. They have just done a fantastic job. They like this whole, not just them, this whole Bengals team. And I also have to credit Zach Taylor with this because he is, he was a joke his first couple of years. And you could say last year that like he was carried by Joe Burrow to a Super Bowl. This year, he's proven that he is a legit NFL head coach because he came in with a real game plan, a legit game plan from the start. They didn't just come out calling plays or just running whatever. They came out with a legit game plan, executed that game plan to perfection, and when something in that game plan didn't work, they made adjustments mid-game, and there are so few teams in the league that are good at that on both sides of the ball, and the Bengals are one of those teams that are great on both sides of the football of making in-game adjustments and still beating your opponent even if the game plan doesn't work. It's something incredible to see. This Bengals team is just so fun to watch, and I'm telling you, Chiefs fans are pissed off that they have to play this team. Like, you understand, they were rooting. I don't know if there was anybody in this planet outside of Bills fans that were rooting for the Bills to win more than Kansas City Chiefs fans, because Joe Burrow has yet to lose to Patrick Mahomes, and now they have to play them in a Arrowhead with Patrick Mahomes hobbled. They're going to play a hobbled Patrick Mahomes against a team that has historically beat them, a quarterback that has historically beat Patrick Mahomes. He's 3-0 against them. All three matchups have been decided by 3 points, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I can't wait. This whole conference championship game weekend is going to be super fun to watch, and I just cannot wait to just sit back and enjoy it all. And I'm not going to give any predictions on it because, like I said, I'm just going to sit back, enjoy it, and I will be here on Sunday, by the way, streaming both of those games and watching it with you guys, and I'm going to be so excited. I'm so excited because conference championship game weekend is here. The Super Bowl is still, 2 weeks away, and I am so pumped for it. But with that being said, that is going to be a wrap on the show today. Like I said, if you have not already, please go like, subscribe, and share the video if you enjoy this content or know anybody who would enjoy this content. If you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter at DDS_pod. And if you haven't already, if you'd like to, go support me on Patreon at patreon.com/Double Diesel Sports. The link to those will be in the description down below. But with that being said, I'm Double Diesel.